early, and I make sure I meet pretty much everyone in the audience and ask them why they're coming and what they're interested in, so you can tailor your answers, because this is such a big subject. It could become really boring for people if it's just not relevant for them. So
yeah,
and that's what I'm really struggling with, this online stuff, because when you meet people face to face, you can tailor what you're saying, you know, and try to talk to each person as an individual, so every individual gets something out of it that's relevant to them. But it's much more difficult to do that online.
true.
But we'll do our best. We'll do our best.
Yes. And hello, Patience. Esther,
Hi,
Sheila.
hi, Stella.
Ladies, hi.
Good to see you.
Hi, Stella.
You too. Sorry, I'm in a car in the middle of Nyandarua, so never mind.
We can see. I see your efforts are appreciated.
For sure.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime. I couldn't miss this for the world.
You know, right?
I'm probably going to be Amanda's first client, but hey.
Nice.
Wow.
Cool.
Awesome.
Okay.
I think we should start.
now?
Yes,
Cool.
yes, we should. Okay, so good morning, ladies. I see already we have 46 participants. I'm expecting more as we go on, and we're streaming live on Facebook as well. So I'm sure this is one of those topics that will just attract so much of a wide audience. So it's really exciting to be here. So many of us have been looking forward to this conversation that started actually with an introduction. I think that was Kentis who just challenged all of us when we were doing an introduction. And then she said, you know, like, we're all global citizens. So we shouldn't just be saying that, you know, yes, we're based in Nairobi, but we have the capability of working for global audiences. And it got us thinking, and we're like, what does it take then to, you know, to thrive in global communication in different roles within the comms industry? And that's how, Amanda, you're here, because we thought, let's get the insights from a recruiter, somebody who's an insider, would know probably what are the skills people are looking out for, employers out there are looking out for, how can we package ourselves, and so forth. So our hashtag today will be global communication. Please tweet and tag us on Twitter. And yeah, with that said, I think we begin with a word of prayer, and then Patience will take over and invite Amanda. So is Winnie Miseda here? If she is, just do the prayer, please, and then we can begin.
Okay, let us pray. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You muted, Winnie.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay, let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we bless your name this morning. We call you holy and say thank you. Thank you for the gift of life. Thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for this one, Lord, that you have made. Above all, I say thank you for the nature of humanity. Lord, we don't take it for granted that you have brought us together. Family, Lord, you have all with the mind, and Lord, the ability and desire to love you. We are God, we exalt you. But as we begin this meeting, Lord, may your wisdom be there, and may we can extend each and every word that we can talk and we can share. Thank you, Father, for taking us in a global way. Don't take it for granted. We are God, we exalt you. We are one to make sure we can say. You hear me? Hello? Hello?
Hello. Hello, Winnie. There's such an echo on your end.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Now, I just finished praying, right? I didn't get the prayer.
Yes, please.
Let me do it.
Okay.
Dear Heavenly Father, in the mighty name of your Son, Jesus Christ, we come before you this morning with a heart full of thanksgiving, giving you glory, giving you honor, and just saying thank you for the gift of life. Thank you for your mercy. Thank you for this right. Lord, we thank you for the network. It's a very taking of things to sit down as a team. People with different minds, different opinions come and bring us together as a family. As we engage in this deliberation today, we call for your wisdom, we ask for your grace and your mercy. Be with us, guide us through, and be exalted. In your holy name, I do pray with thanksgiving.
Amen. Amen. Okay, thank you so much, Winnie. We'll now go to Patience, who will introduce Amanda. As the session goes on, feel free to ask your questions, place them in the chat, and Amanda will take on those, even as she addresses some of those we have already sent beforehand. So Patience, take over, please. You're muted, Patience. We can't hear you.
Sorry. Thank you, Esther Kirago, and thank you all the ladies for joining in during this session. I'm very happy to be back home now, and I'm very happy to be joining this from Kenya at this point. And so my conversation with Amanda, and Amanda, maybe just before I introduce you, I would love to just tell you what this group is all about. So the group that is joining today, these are women in media and PR, and we have had this discussion maybe just a few minutes before you joined in. So all our conversations rotate around what we do in either media. Some of them are, or some of us are journalists, or others are within the PR and communication sector, working for government, working for non-governmental organization. Others are in consultancies, have their own consultancies. So ideally, we are all women in media and PR, and we've been here for a very long time, maybe about 4 or 5 years together as a group, and we're about 256 women. So we sit down and help each other grow. We mentor each other. We have conversation around how we can make this sector a better sector for all of us. And so today, when I was in Cardiff, and then of course during the launch of the report that was done by the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, the rest in PR, I realized there's a conversation concerning the Black community, and as you say, the BEM community, Black, Asian, and minority ethnic. So the conversation was, is there a problem for this community when they go into public relations, for example, in global markets? How else can we make ourselves valuable? How else can we make ourselves to be the best people that we can, or maybe for us to be able to thrive and to compete with the white counterparts that we get on the other side? And so when we had a conversation with you and I listened to you for the very first time, I was like, okay, this is really interesting. And then I thought it would be very nice for me to bring you on board so that you can tell these things, you can tell us some of the tips that we need to know to be alive to maybe. And of course, you from a recruitment perspective, you've interviewed professionals, you understand what it is, some of the challenges that we have, some of the hurdles we've encountered when we have had to think of jobs. And then of course, I understand some of the conversations we had, you say people join in very fresh and very excited about this journey, but then they don't live through the journey. So maybe some of the things that we want to hear from you is for us to be able to understand how else can we make ourselves marketable? How else can we make ourselves stay true to the calling that we think we are called to do this conversation, which is media and PR. And so I would like to introduce Amanda, who we met in the UK, and she's been in the recruitment industry for about 35 years now and runs her own consultancy that specializes in marketing and communication sector that is called F1 Recruitment Limited, which started sometime, I think, in 2004, if I get it right. One of the things that she's really keen about is really the stereotyping and unconscious bias that she has seen over the years through hiring of managers, from CEOs, who have always, and she says, this surprises me. So she believes in equality in the workplace. When it comes to gender, ethnicity, disability, all these things are really key to her. But I would love to give her the opportunity to introduce herself and to tell us more about what she does and what she thinks about this industry and how else can women be meaningful in this industry. So over to you, Amanda. Welcome. We are here to listen to you. Thank you.
Okay, well, look, I'll do a brief introduction, but I do really want to, I've seen some of the questions that you've got, and I really want to sort of answer the questions that people have got as well, and sort of tailor things as much as I possibly can. I was just saying to Patience and Esther before we started that I'm really missing going to conferences and meeting people face to face, because that way you can really understand each individual's questions and their individual journey that they're either about to start on in the comms industry, or that they've been the challenges that they've been facing as they've been going through it. So Yeah, Patience, thank you. That basically was my introduction. So you've done a great job. So I just a sort of little bit of background about me. I'm in my mid-50s now, and I set out on my career journey when I was 18 and actually didn't take up a place at university, which at the time my parents, who were very ambitious middle class, first, neither of them went to university. Eldest child didn't go to university, and it was very challenging because the expectation was for me to go to university to read English and get a job at the BBC. That was my career trajectory, and I didn't go that route. I started work at 18 for a recruitment company, which was not at the time, back in the early 80s, seen as a particularly prestigious career. And I'll come back to why this is relevant in a minute, because I've noticed that a lot of the Black and Asian minority ethnic people that I work with often come up against the same challenges with their own parents and their own family connections about what is an acceptable career and what is not an acceptable career, and should you get professional qualifications. So my dad was a chartered accountant and my mother she was a trained journalist. Both of them had formal training behind them, despite the fact they didn't go to university. So when I went into recruitment, it was a very low barrier to entry. You just had to be kind of ambitious and driven, and it's a very meritocratic environment. And I stayed in recruitment for 35 years because one of the tips I was given is become an expert at something. Don't jump around in your professional life if you can possibly avoid it. Move businesses, but try and become really, really good at a particular profession and keep up to date with that profession as you develop your career over a period of decades. Now, I'm also female. I also got married and I got divorced within a period of 5 years in my early 30s, and I was on my own with 2 little boys, aged 2 and 1. So I'd worked in recruitment for about 13, 14 years by that point, probably a bit longer actually. No, it would have been 20 years actually. And I decided to set up my own business because in London at the time, it was actually very challenging to have 2 small children. This is back in 1997, and actually be taken seriously in your career, because flexible working was very challenging then. And we're all women, I think, in this conversation, and we all have to navigate our own careers, and female careers are very different to male careers because we sort of they never go in a linear line, they never go in a straight line. We sort of wiggle around. I think it's called a sort of jungle gym or a gymkhana. Is that we move around, it always goes horizontal and then up and then backwards. So us as females, we have to navigate our own careers, whether we stay in a business, whether we set up on our own, when we freelance. And as a single mother, I had to work out how I was going to basically keep my career going and also look after bring up my kids. So I set up my own business when I was 40, because in London at the time, it was very, very difficult to get flexible working. And the only way I could get flexible working was basically to run my own business. Now, my business specialized in marketing and PR. So I've been interviewing PR professionals for the last 35 years. And my business set up the BAME 2020 movement in 2016, actually with a candidate of mine, a Black male candidate who I could see was really struggling to get to the top of the marketing profession. And he was about to leave the profession because he couldn't see enough people that looked like him at the top of the marketing profession. And frankly, if he'd been in the PR and comms profession, he'd have been saying exactly the same thing to me, because in the UK, we have less than 4% of the PR and marketing profession are non-white, all right? And for a multicultural, community, particularly in London, how can that be? The PR sector has been growing exponentially since the late 1970s. So this is not a young profession. This is a profession that's been around for nearly half a century. How can we still have such lack of representation of all the communities inside the sector? 50 years on. So when Adrian came to me and said, I'm going to leave the industry and set up on my own, I said, well, you can do that, Adrian, but why don't we actually just do something together? Because together we can be quite influential. A middle-class white woman and a black working class man, we can come together and stand shoulder to shoulder. And between the two of us, you've got the marketing comms experience, I've got the recruitment experience. I think we can actually influence this market to make change. So in 2016, we set up BAME 2020, which Patience referred to. And we had two very simple aims. The first aim was to make sure that 20% of the comms and marketing sector is represented by non-white people. And the second was to keep that 20% in the sector right into the very, very top jobs. This year, we've launched something called No Turning Back, because, of course, COVID has affected all of our lives in one way or another. And we've had the Black Lives Matter movement, really come to the fore. So the year 2020 for us is the year for no turning back. So whatever progress has been made inside organizations towards a greater volume or a greater community of people coming into the sector from a Black, Asian, minority ethnic background, and whatever work's being done to keep that community inside the sector, we're saying this year has to be the year where we can't go backwards because of COVID, because COVID has disrupted all organizations' recruitment and retention, but we cannot let 2020 be the year where all the good work that's been done suddenly gets put on the shelf and we forget about it. We have to now use this year to be the catalyst year to move things forward with even more energy. So No Turning Back has got another two objectives. One is that, and some of you that, I don't know how many of you have used recruitment consultancies locally in Kenya and what their reputation is like. But recruitment consultancies in London, I'm afraid, do have a reputation, particularly in the PR and marketing sector, and I'm going to generalize here, and there's none of my competitors here, okay? So, but they are very, very good at doing what their clients ask them to do, because the way recruitment works is that you are normally paid on results, okay? So if you walk into a business and everybody in that business is middle class white and you want to please your client, you will often put a shortlist together that looks like, talks like the people that you've just met inside an organization. And what I've been challenging for many, many years with CEOs of PR agencies and comms directors inside organizations is I will ask them to look around their team, to be introduced to some of their team. And I will then say to them, this is very interesting because you have just said to me that your clients want diversity of thinking in the work that you're producing for them. And you have just told me that your consumer base is very diverse. You have just given me a breakdown of the demographic of your consumer base that you're selling your goods and services to, but yet I don't see that representation inside your own team. Silence. Oh, yes. Well, we're doing something about that. Okay, well, so because as a recruiter, I'm here to help your organization be better representative of the consumers that you serve. And I've read your website, and your CEO has made a fantastic statement about diversity and inclusion. But don't you think it would be great if the comms team or this PR consultancy could be trailblazing? And that's where the BAME 2020 20% comes in, and we start to have the conversation about how many people in their organization are non-white and non-middle class, actually, because the comms sector, certainly in the UK, and I think globally, is quite a middle class white Russell Group University, we call it, or Ivy League University type of profession. So no turning back. The first objective for no turning back is please only use recruitment companies that can demonstrate and evidence on an ongoing basis that at least 15% of their candidate base is non-white. And they have to be able to evidence that. And the second thing is that the organization can demonstrate that it has an inclusive culture. Because what we know through the work we've done through BAME 2020 is that the reason that the PR sector in London specifically loses Black and Asian minority ethnic professionals from it, normally within the first 5 years, is because the people that we are bringing into the sector and saying this is a fair sector, this is a meritocratic sector, it doesn't matter what background you come from, what education you have, you know, what ethnicity you come from, you will all get on. You know, it simply isn't true, because we lose, and the PRCA have just published a recent race report that it gives qualitative research to support what we've seen through BAME 2020, is that we lose people 3 to 5 years into their career because they just don't see people like them getting on inside organizations, whether that's an in-house PR team or an agency. So the second piece of no turning back is for organizations to demonstrate and evidence that they have an inclusive culture, because we know that people will not stay working for an organization. And this doesn't matter whether it's a 5-person PR consultancy or marketing consultancy or digital agency, or, you know, a 12,500 global organization with a PR team of, you know, globally of, you know, 100 people. People will not stay inside an organization if it's not inclusive. And one of the things we've heard back from a lot of our BME members of the BMA of the BAME 2020 network is that there is, you know, that there is unconscious bias in the workplace. There is racism in the workplace. You know, a lot of it is unintentional, but it goes unnoticed because the leadership team in an organization does not understand white privilege. It does not understand that there is, you know, that most white people are racist. They don't think they're racist. They can't even have a conversation about racism without it becoming an emotional conversation. So one of the other things I've been doing quite a lot of podcasts about, you know, about white privilege, and just saying to all CEOs that I know is just get a grip. You know, we've all got white privilege, you know, and we're all racist. Just try to understand the subject, stop getting emotional about it, and recognize that there is systemic racism inside your workplace, and there's systemic racism inside society. So, but we're the people that, and it's not a Black problem, it's a white problem. We have to get our heads around the fact it's a white problem. So what you don't do is hire a Black diversity and inclusion expert to come and solve the white problem, because all you're doing is giving them the problem. So there are various podcasts which I'll send you where over the break, I call it a break, I mean a break from me talking at conferences, I've been doing some quite kind of, I guess, punchy work really with CEOs. And I've given a lot of my CEOs a reading list, actually, which I'm sure you can all help me with adding to that reading list, because there's a massive education still that we need to do. And I'm sure most of you think London is a frightfully sophisticated market with lots of, you know, amazing American and, you know, global PR consultancies. I can tell you, we are not that sophisticated, okay? And we are, the comms sector is, I believe, still in complete denial about it being a middle-class white profession, because it sort of pays lip service to the fact it's open to all, but it kind of isn't really, because you can only get so far. Now, one of the reasons I've been able to be so outspoken is because I'm independent. I don't have a boss. The only boss I have is my clients. And they can sack me, and frankly, if they want to sack me, I don't care, because I don't want to work for them anyway. So, you know, I think, and Adrian and I are both independent because he runs his own consultancy. So we've had to tread a very careful path, because some of the messaging, I mean, I feel like I'm speaking to home team here, so I can't see all the faces, so I don't know whether some of your eyes are popping out of your head, but I think that I have a lot of, you know, I'm very tapped into the BME community back in London, and it's taken me, you know, a long time to win trust. But I really feel that the community feels that, you know, my business and I am on their side and I am fighting their corner. And one of the things that's helped Adrian and me, going back to this partnership, is that as a white woman, I couldn't have done this on my own. I could not have gone on this journey. You know, actually, I wouldn't have been brave enough, because I needed a black ally with me, and Adrian needed a white ally with him, and together, you know, and I think it's very similar to the women's movement. You know, I grew up in London during the 1980s, macho, testosterone, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley. You know, it was a really aggressive Thatcher-led, you know, you can be, and the testosterone in London was extraordinary. And for a young woman trying to carve your career, you know, it was very challenging. And one of the things that the women's movement, particularly in the UK, really started to move on gender equality, and somebody's going to ask a question about the glass ceiling and, you know, gender pay gap and stuff. It really started to change, I would say, only about 8 years ago. I remember specifically being at a CBI conference, and 2 men got up to speak, and they both had daughters, and both their daughters had been denied access to the boys' football team, and they said, that is not good enough. Our daughters should be able to be whatever they want to be. So I am now, this was two senior guys who worked for big global banks. They're saying, I'm now becoming a feminist. I'm now going to back the women's movement, because I don't want my kids and my daughters, I don't want my sons growing up with any, we have to understand that men and women need to work together for everybody to get on in the workplace. And I think this is what's happening actually with the Black, Asian, minority ethnic movement, certainly in the UK, is that the more that white people understand it is a white problem, but we have to all work together. Now that introduction went to a place that I was not expecting it to go to. So I hope that's given you a bit of an overview of kind of who I am, what my business does. I use my recruitment business. Look, my recruitment business is a commercial organization, okay? I have kept it quite small, because the profits, 40% of the profits of the business go into the to the BAME 2020 movement. And I also want to run a women's returner program, because one of the other problems we've had in the UK is that there's been a big attrition rate at about, well, it's when the average age of a woman having a child in the UK has gone up from 31 years old to 33 years old. And I don't know what the average age is in Kenya, but you know, going back to my point about our careers being not, you know, the career has been built for a male career, because a male career is linear. It goes in one direction. Normally it goes up, or they get out, or they're out. So they go up, redundancy, up, redundancy, up. It's very, they don't tend to come out for years unless they're doing a, you know, an MBA, for example, or, you know, a placement. Whereas the female career is much more jiggly. So having children, if you take a break from your career, it's very, very difficult to get back in because of the gap on the CV. So I've run a returners program for the last 7 years, and F1 funds, 40% of our profits go into both those movements. So I use the recruitment business as a platform for activist change, okay? Because if I wasn't in recruitment, I would be doing something around activating change in the workplace. But the recruitment consultancy gives me the platform and the influence, and obviously the network at very senior level, because I've been doing it for such a long time, to actually influence change. Right, I'm going to stop there for a minute. Do you want to, Patience, do you want me to answer any questions, or is there anything I haven't sort of covered in the introduction?
Yes, thank you so much, Amanda, for that introduction. At least now we have an understanding of who you are and the kind of business that you do. And of course, we are very grateful for the fact that you're very deliberate about trying to grow the number of Black, or the number of the BEM community in the public relations society within the UK. And maybe we had already gotten some questions, and Wavi Mugala, I think I call him Mugai, but I see your name written as Mugala. You muted, Wavi. Wavi will probably take you through some of the questions, and then maybe you can answer those questions. And then while we do that, once we see some of the questions that will be coming through the chat here, we'll be reading them to you as well. So all you need to do, don't be worried, Wavi will be guiding us through the questions. Yes.
All right.
Wavi, over to you.
Sure. Hi, Amanda.
Hi. Thank
Yes.
you for doing. You've been doing some very nice, warm smiling at me as I've been speaking. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I smile by default setting. So
was a way of agreeing to what you're saying.
Right. Yeah. And especially when you start talking about unconscious bias and privilege, you know, paying lip service to some of these really very crucial spaces. So for me, I think, you know, when you talked about that racism is systemic, and accepting it that, you know, we need to work together. So that was fantastic. I was almost doing a little jig. So let's get into the Q&A. And the first question is, the field of communication and PR is really very diverse, and it's constantly changing. And I think even more so with COVID. But with this in mind, and especially from a recruitment perspective, how does one best package themselves for a global communication or PR role? And I think based on the context where we, before the session began, it could be, you know, stepping out to a different country, or it could be working for a global, an international organization within Kenya. But how do you position yourself for a global communication and PR role?
Yeah. Okay, so look, this rather depends on what stage of your career you're at, because I think that if I was talking to a young person that was coming into the sector that had an ambition to work for an international organization locally, i.e. staying in Kenya, or was saying, actually, I would like to move. Let's just put COVID to one side for a moment, okay? I wanted to move, I don't know, to work for the United Nations, or I wanted to work, go and work in North America or Singapore or Dubai. The advice I would give them, and actually it's the advice I've been giving my nephews and nieces at the moment who are coming in, who are all leaving university, and that is, number one, you need to join an organization where you're going to get a good training. So if you have the choice, and you're wanting to go into PR, you should, we all know there are various routes in. I'll come back to the packaging of the skills in a minute, but the various routes in, you either train as a journalist, don't you? So you need to get a good training behind you, and then get a very good placement somewhere, and stay in your first job for a couple of years. The second route in would be via a PR consultancy. So if you're going to go and join a small local PR consultancy, you need to have a look at their client list, and you need to make sure that a couple of the clients on their client list are global organizations that are immediately recognizable, like a Procter & Gamble or a Unilever or an HSBC or a Visa or a McDonald's or a Adidas. I can go on. Okay, look at the Olympic sponsors, look at the FIFA sponsors, right? And there you have global brands that have a global presence. If your small PR agency you are looking to join has got some of those clients, now they might not, but then I would look at the leadership team and the owner of the business, and I would look at where they've worked before. So for example, if they had worked in marketing or comms at L'Oreal, or any of those companies I've just mentioned, McDonald's, any of those big global companies, it doesn't matter what sector, whether it's financial services or professional services or FMCG or consumer tech. But if they don't have that, an international business on the client roster, look at the senior person's background, because if they do, it will mean they are running their consultancy with a certain rigor that they were taught inside a global business, inside a global business. And then the third entry level would be as a PR exec, media relations exec inside a business. So again, if you're joining a local business that is not known globally, so if you put the name of the company on the CV, people are going to say, that sounds very nice, but what do they do and who are they? Ideally, you would join an international business that has got a local franchise or a local office in your area, so you can get a good global organization on your CV. Because I think if you don't have that in your first 2 to 3 years in the sector, you are going to struggle then to move on into to get that global international piece. So so now what some people do is join a small PR consultancy, get the training, because obviously, and I know there are people on this call that run their own small comms agencies. So the truth is, if you join a smaller PR agency, you're working very closely with the owner, you're going to be trained within an inch of your life, because that is the owner's business, and they're probably only going to hire bloody brilliant people, and they're going to train them quickly, and they're going to be put in front of clients very quickly, more quickly probably than they would be if they joined, I don't know, an Edelman or a Hill & Knowlton working in your local market, because I don't know how big those offices are, it might not be good examples, but there's probably a smaller PR agency of maybe 5 to 10 people. You are probably going to get exposure to come to your clients more quickly than if you're working in a bigger company, and you'll be exposed to the leader. So I would say that if somebody joins a smaller agency, they will be trained faster, probably have more exposure faster. But if you really want an international career and there are no international clients inside that PR agency's client roster and no ambition to get international clients, then you should move on within 3 years, because otherwise you will get sidelined and you will become an expert working for working on local work. There's nothing wrong with that. There are loads of people in the UK that run incredibly successful small niche PR businesses where they only work with local companies that, frankly, if I told you the local companies' names, you'd never have heard of them, because they're not global. They're not global organizations. So I think that if that's a little bit of guidance for people that are earlier on in their career. I think the second part of that question was, how do I package myself for so if I've got experience, 5 to 8 years experience, and I want to work more internationally, how do I package myself up? And I think there's 2 parts to that question, which is, one is if I want to stay in the local market. So if I want to stay working in locally, but I want to work on international clients. Now this is okay. So I'm very careful what I say here, because I don't want all of you charging off and then shaping your careers based on my experience, because of course my experience is local to the London market, but we do recruit internationally. And I know what my clients internationally look for. So if I'm moving somebody from, say, Edelman or Weber or Hill & Knowlton in London internationally, it is much easier for me to get them a job if they've got those names on their CV, an international agency. If they've worked on international clients, it is much easier for me to move them anywhere in the world other than North America, because it's very difficult to get work permits there. So I think the packaging of your skill set, that's the other part of the question. Look, we're working in a very integrated world. In my experience, whenever I've interviewed people from Kenya or from South Africa or from Australia or from, frankly, almost anywhere in the world other than London, you've always had an integrated skill set. Most of you have always done media relations. You were quite quick on the digital and social. Most of you have done corporate communications and stakeholder engagement and issues, and you've done a bit of government work and policy work, as well as consumer media relations, because I think your clients generally expect you to be, if you're giving a public relations advice, you should actually be able to do most of that. Whereas in London, we compartmentalize it. You will have a corporate team, you will have a crisis team, you will have a consumer team. Now we have digital and social and creative hubs that service clients in the bigger agencies. So people in London get siloed very, very quickly in their careers. They become, experts not only in a sector, but within their own, you could become a crisis communications expert in the financial services industry. So you narrow quite quickly. And I'm always saying to people in London, really be careful you don't narrow too quickly, because if you don't want, how many jobs are there for top communications directors that for crisis in financial services? You're immediately narrowing yourself. So if you're going to become a crisis expert, become an issues expert, and a crisis and issues and stakeholder issues, across regulated industries, maybe, because there are lots of organizations that would sit inside a regulated industries pot, for example. But I think one of the positives about I would think most of your experience is that it's not too specialist. It is more generic, and it is more so you've probably got wider sector experience because your clients are probably broader, and you've probably got, somebody listed in a question I saw all the list I just made of the skill set. I would think a lot of you have all of those, and I think the question is, should you be pulling any of those out? Is it better to say that you're an expert, or is it better to look generic? And then of course, if you look too generic, then if the client is looking for something specific, they're going to say that person's too much of a generalist, right? And it's a really difficult answer to give, because if you're applying for a particular job, obviously you've got to pull out the relevant experience for the job. So you don't want your CV, your experience, to look as though it's too specialist. So it does depend on the job that you're applying for. But I would say that, look, my main point I'm making here is, if you want your career to be international, you do need to have worked for international businesses, because that's when someone looks at a CV. If I'm moving somebody to work internationally, the first thing the client will say to me, well, they'll look at the CV and they'll go, how many international businesses have they already worked for as a client or in-house? So I think we were talking earlier about some of you working for local government. Now, local government experience is useful, but I can't get people roles in Whitehall that haven't worked in Whitehall. If they've been in Brussels for the last 5 years, well, we're not part of the European Union anymore, so they're not as interested in Brussels experience anymore. If someone's worked, for the government of, Qatar, or has been over in Dubai and has worked, a lot of the work over in the Middle East is government-led. Is the British government particularly interested in that experience when they get back? Not necessarily, unless they're running, a Middle Eastern client from London. It's not local Whitehall experience. So the local government experience will be interesting, but if it's a government relations led job, you kind of have to have the local. You need to know the local landscape. Somebody mentioned the United Nations. I think for someone like the UN, yes, of course, your local government relations experience is going to be depending on the job you're going for, will be useful. Have I kind of tried to answer that question?
Yes, and I think then you actually even answered my second question, because it was really also about, would specializing be a limiting factor or not? But you have really, I think, put together that there are benefits to having an integrated skill set, and probably looking at it in terms of whatever job you're applying for, what skill sets do you have that are transferable? So I think you, have answered actually my second question, or rather the second part
Wabi,
of the...
There's a little bit there that I would just looking at my notes actually, because what I did want to say to all of you was that the skill set that I'm hearing more and more people talking about, and remember that I work across marketing as well as digital, okay? And I'm hearing that a lot of organizations are starting to want a blend of in-house experience and agency experience. So don't forget, all of you that have got in-house experience, that what agencies really need to understand at the moment is what the client wants from their agency. And clients' needs are changing dramatically at the moment. So I'll give you an example. I've got an international PR agency we're working with at the moment. The CEO comes from a consumer background, and he is trying to grow his corporate affairs offering. He's not a corporate expert himself. They're part of a wider group of media and advertising agencies. And his corporate affairs group, he needs to grow. So what I've done is I've given him a senior PR practitioner that has got agency experience, but she's been in-house at Coca-Cola for the last 6 years. She's done an agency pitch recently. And this agency that I'm working for was not on the pitch list, wasn't even on the long list. So she's going to go in on a short-term contract to help this new CEO work out, A, why they're not getting onto pitch lists, but B, how they're articulating their corporate offering, because it's not being seen as relevant. And she, one of the things she was saying that she's been looking for, and this is Coca-Cola, they have huge PR budgets. The agencies that she's been having on her pitch list, some of them have been global agencies, but she's actually been using smaller agencies, owner managed, that are far more integrated, that when they go in to talk to the client, they are talking about the client's communication challenge. It's the business challenge they've got around comms is the first thing. And then they look at all their stakeholder groups and say, right, which is the most important stakeholder group we should be talking to? So do you have digital and social capability? Do you have data, insights and planners in your team? Do you understand what ESG means? Environmental, societal and governance. ESG is an acronym you're going to hear loads and loads more of. It's come out of the whole sustainability and purpose piece. So ESG, environmental, societal, governance. Does that team have that experience? So any of you that have got that governance, sustainability, societal and environmental experience, you need to start putting that on your CV, because it's going to become really important. And then policy and government relations, those are really key areas of change at the moment across the world. But going back to the in-house experience, people say to me a lot, if I've gone in-house, does that mean I can't apply for agency jobs again? Well, no, it doesn't, because you can bring something very special back into an agency. There are a lot of agencies that are run by very good in-house PR people that they think they set up a PR agency because they've been in-house. They actually understand what a corporate affairs director, what a PR director actually needs from their agency. Correct. So they think they can tailor the services much more accurately, because if you're running a PR agency, you've never actually worked in-house. How do you actually know what the relationships are in-house and what the internal stakeholder,
politics.
Exactly.
All right, then. So, Amanda, let's talk a little bit about the politics. That's, now that we've gotten into it, that Black women need to be aware of when going for, top global positions. And in your experience as a recruiter, what are these common hurdles that you have seen, Black PR or comms professional face when they're looking to attain these top global jobs?
Well, to be honest, I've never really found that it's been that's me. I've always put balanced shortlists together, and I think my clients are very, very careful with me about the feedback they give, because I've never had anybody discriminated against on a shortlist. But that's because people come to us because they know that they are going to get a diverse shortlist, because we see over 20% of our candidates are from a non-white background. And we also look inside that at the social demographic as well. So we look at the social mobility piece as well, because we have a real problem in the UK about PR being a very middle class profession. So in terms of, I mean, I've just done a big piece of work for the government in the UK, and for a big comms role, and they came to us specifically because they wanted a diverse shortlist, and the long list was 13 people and 7 of them were non-white. Okay, and out of the final shortlist there were 5 and 2 were non-white, and the person that got the job was a white person, but from an experience basis, the black lady on the shortlist, the one bit she didn't have was the Whitehall experience. So it was a genuine, what I call a genuine occupational credential. She just simply didn't have. But interestingly, they will probably hire her at some point into the team anyway. So
then the focus stops becoming about, you know, race and whether you're black or not, and it's more about meritocracy. Yeah,
I mean, at the moment, frankly, particularly in the UK, I mean, if you are black and good at your job in the UK, now is the time. You are just going to rise straight to the top. It is your moment. I mean, all of our ambassadors, I'm saying to them, you know, men and women, this is it. This is what we've been working towards. This is your time. Okay, and get out there. There's nothing stopping you now, because these CEOs, and it's not just tokenism, they really, really want black talent on their boards. It is genuine, and they know they have not been engaged properly in the last 10 years. It has been quite a lot of window dressing, if we're honest. They haven't been really getting their head around the fact that they are, you know, when you talk to people like Diageo and Unilever and Procter & Gamble and these big organizations are saying, that's it, enough's enough. You know, our comms teams are now going to be selecting the PR agencies they work with on the basis of their diversity, you know, and that comes down the food chain, because I'm now getting, I mean, we work for Sky, and I've just had their pitch to become one of their preferred suppliers. And I've been lobbying for this for so many years, and I've actually got to present on diversity and inclusion. So we won't even be able to recruit for Sky unless we can demonstrate, going back to what I said about no turning back, that we can't demonstrate that we have at least 15 to 20% of non-white people on our candidate portfolio. That is a massive, massive change, because recruiters have never been asked that before. They just recruit in the like. So if you've got organizations like Sky saying, you can't recruit for our organization unless you can demonstrate that you have a diverse candidate portfolio, and then beyond that, and then we have to evidence that every shortlist we put together is diverse, and then we have to evidence how those people get on in their interviews, and if they don't get through, the company has to tell us, give us proper feedback, and it has to be evidence-based. And if they are not getting through, it needs to be, you know, I think there's a word in here about character or cultural fit. Wasn't there something around an excuse being given that it's not a good cultural fit? That is unacceptable now. That is unacceptable feedback. You know, if somebody said that, oh, we didn't think they were a good cultural fit. What are you talking about? Okay.
But you know, Amanda,
accent most of the time.
Yeah, and I think that it addresses the issue around where diversity was more for tokenism, and yes, we can say it's fantastic. You know, employers are beginning to say, let's get Black women in, let's Black Lives Matter. But don't you think that they still need to address the unconscious bias that's, you know, often portrayed by these organizations and also recruiters when Black candidates are being rejected for not having a good cultural fit? What does that even mean? You know?
Well,
So
look, I think that this is, you know, companies nowadays create a massive own goal for themselves, because if you go onto any organization's website, they will talk about their values. Okay. So their values, okay, so their values will be courageous or driven or fairness, creative, or, you know, you can all come up with all the words that we see on people's websites. And I say to every candidate, go and look at the website and talk about lived values. How do your staff live their values? How do you, as the boss, live your organization's values? Because what we've done as a recruiter is we've looked at your values, we've listened to what your recruiters have told us in-house about what you're looking for in terms of skills and competencies and experience. And now we're looking to match, aren't we, the character of the individual and the values of the individual to the values of your business. So what we've done is we've curated a short list of people for you. And what we're trying to do now is match the values of the individuals on that shortlist, because there's no point putting somebody onto there are good and bad matches in organizations. We all have different, you know, all of us have different values and what we think are important about our working life and who we are. And as we go through our careers, we learn more about who we are and what we will tolerate inside a business we work for. In terms of their value set. And if we don't see the value set that we bought into when we joined an organization, if we don't see them being lived, we leave, or we put up with it, and in our head we somehow justify it because we need to earn a salary and we put up with it. Okay, but in the end we do not stay working for people, with people, because that's all companies are, is they're people. Okay, they're people living a set of collective values that someone somewhere has brainstormed and said, this is what our company stands for. So actually, when you're talking about cultural fit, what we're actually talking about is, what we're actually saying then is, okay, so what you're saying is that person, you are rejecting them because they do not have the same values as your organization. Is that what you're actually saying? Because when we met this person, they were able to demonstrate, and let me give you the 3 examples they gave me to demonstrate that they have tenacity, or they have ambition, or they have simpatico. They are a sympathetic person, you know, they are a listener. Let me give you examples. Are you sure this is really the reason you are rejecting them? Okay, so, and I think this is what you're talking about, is for too long people have been able to hide, and actually I'm afraid email has made it even worse, because the last 20 years I'm afraid email has made it even worse, because it's very easy just to go no to this candidate because, oh, it wasn't a good cultural fit. Now you see, back in the day, and I'm a very old-fashioned recruiter, you know, I worked on the phone and face to face, so you're much more accountable if you're a recruiting manager and you've got a recruiter going, okay, let's do verbal feedback here, and you can push back and say, what are you actually saying here? What hang on a minute, what do you actually mean not a good cultural fit? Oh, what's going on here now? And you know, and at that situation, I, you know, can be pushy enough, I guess, to say to a client, hey, just interesting, that's a Black person and you have no Black people in your team, so is there something going on here now? And that's the next thing, is that you know, most recruitment consultants, you know, and this is the trouble with my sector, is that they don't, you know, they will not push back to actually uncover. And I think that what that gets pushed down the chain. So by the time the candidate gets the feedback, all they're getting is, oh well, the client just told me it wasn't a good cultural fit, or someone hides behind email and just says, you know, wasn't quite right, skill set wasn't quite right, didn't feel like a good cultural fit. What do you mean by that? You know, and I think email has not helped at all. But going back to your question, do I think that, look, I do think there has been a big sea change even in the last 6 months. And I think that all recruitment in-house people are much more aware now that they, you know, there's a lot more sort of blind CV happening. So when we put shortlists together, we have to take off names, we have to take off education, we have to take off company names. I mean, I'm a bit worried that actually it becomes very, what I call vanilla. Everybody starts to look the same. And LinkedIn, you know, LinkedIn, anybody can look anybody up on LinkedIn, can't they? And all the information's there anyway. So in a way, LinkedIn kind of, is there unconscious bias just even looking at LinkedIn, you know, because there's often, you can tell an awful lot about a person if they haven't got a photograph up there. So unconscious bias training, look, I think unconscious bias training is useful. Do I think it actually leads to long-term systemic change in attitude? No, I don't. I think it's a very nice thing to have inside an organization, but I've seen too many companies just do, oh, we've put the whole company through unconscious bias training. Now, none of them, they're all going to be brilliant at, it's a 1 hour training course. That's all it is. It makes people have the, oh, and aha moment, but then they go straight back. How are you actually going to change? You know, because if you've had unconscious bias and you've got it, and you're recruiting for an organization, you've been doing it for the last 15 years, you're not going to change overnight. So it's got to be ongoing, and it needs to be built into everything from the interview process to the onboarding process, to the appraisal process, to the promotion process, to the mentoring process, the sponsoring inside organizations, reverse mentoring. You know, it's got to be unconscious bias. You're right, it's there, but it's at every single stage of somebody's career in an organization. From the very first time they apply for the role, it's right the way through. So, you know, a 1 hour's unconscious bias training, it's not going to solve the long, that's a quick fix for companies. It doesn't cost them very much, and they can put the whole company through it in a matter of days. And then they can do the tick box, we've all done unconscious bias training. You know, that means that our diversity figures will go up. Sorry, it will make no difference at all.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about how the PR and comms industry is really very female dominated, really well over 60%, I think. But at senior levels, male privilege checks in. You know, it becomes quite male dominated, and women are not equally represented. So why do you think this is the case, and what should women do differently in order to balance the numbers up the ladder? And maybe just a local example on our end here in Kenya. I think our chairman for the local chapter of the Public Relations Society of Kenya was actually recently recruited as a CEO of the Kenya Promotion Branding and Agency. And it was very exciting, you know, for us to have someone in PR.
Our very own.
Yeah, I know, yeah, like become a CEO. But then you look at it and, you know, he's a guy, you know, so then male privilege checked in there. How do we get more women in that space? Why do you think that that is the case?
Look, I don't know how paternal your local society is still. And
very patriarchal.
You know, very.
Yeah, well, there we go. You see, you know, this is, you know, I think that, look, I think that we tackled this inside the UK with, I know the lady who runs the women's unit at Cranfield University here, and she worked with the government to try and tackle this problem with women. And the way they handled it first was to go, they went the easy route actually, which was non-exec directors. And there was a quota, I don't know whether you remember it, but I think it was called the Taylor. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but anyway, there was a real drive about 8 years ago to get I think it was 30% of females on the boards of British PLCs, because they did a survey and it was horrendous how few there were. And then this started to go across government. I mean, you'll have seen the drive in the British government, how many more female MPs there are than there were 20 years ago. So the British PLCs now, I think, have reached the target of, it was either 25 or 30% of non-executive directors, because that was quite an easy thing for them to change over a period of 5 years. NEDs, non-execs. Now we've turned our heads to really looking at it, the boards, the main boards. And you're right that that communications and marketing people, there is a route through to being CEO. But let's face it, a lot of CEOs have come up the finance route. Some have come up sales. So if you're a marketeer, I mean, there are very few comms people, unless it's of trade associations,
or a branding agency,
charities or non-for-profit, where you really need to have excellent communication skills. You could come up the comms route, but if you want to be a CEO, you've probably got to move into marketing and sales, because there's two routes in, isn't there? It's either up marketing and sales route. You look at someone like Diane Thompson, who ran Camelot. She came up the marketing route. You look at Justin, can't remember what his surname is, who ran Sainsbury's. He came up the sales and marketing route. Or you go and become a chartered accountant. You got the finance route. But in addressing the female thing, look, it does go back to what I say about female careers. Now, the pandemic has actually done us a massive service here, okay? And women have really got to, I tell you, I've been lobbying for years about how flexible working should be mainstream. And I've been lobbying to get the drop-down box on online ads have full-time and part-time. And I've been lobbying for years to say, get rid of the part-time, because immediately women, particularly in childbearing years, often need flexibility. And we're far too honest for our own good. We apply for a job that's a full-time job because it's an interesting one, because the part-time jobs are probably paying a lot less and a bit boring and not very senior. So we go for the full-time jobs, and then there's this massive elephant in the room, because what we actually want to say is, well, I can do this job, but I actually only want to do it 3 days a week because I've actually got caring responsibilities as well. Or I want some flexibility. Now, the pandemic has just literally blown that whole argument that men used to put actually in place, because remember, this is a male career that's been created. Our organizations have been created around presenteeism, i.e. factory workers. We haven't moved on from the Industrial Revolution, really. Presenteeism and a linear career, right? Females, our argument's been for a long time, we don't need to be physically there to do a good job, okay? We can be accountable. We can demonstrate our productivity can be just as high. We can run teams,
That's true. And if I can get my work done within the same 24 hours, it doesn't matter whether I started at 9 in the morning or I did it at midnight after the kids went to sleep, right? Exactly.
So the pandemic has blown that whole argument out of the water. Now, what us women really need to do now is, because what is going to happen is, of course, now all the men have decided that it's great to work from home, isn't it, for 3 days a week, and go in on a only go in 2 days a week, and or work from home. So now the every role is flexible. Every role is flexible, because we're not, most of us aren't even allowed to go into our place of work, and we're about to have another blooming national lockdown here. So we've just started to go back, and we're all going to be working from home again soon. So this problem, and I think it has been a problem for women, is how to navigate their career in the years if they are having a family, or if they've got caring responsibilities with elderly relatives, or they have, extended families that they have also got caring responsibilities for. And I think the lion's share of that historically has fallen to women, not men. And men, and I think I ran a group years ago called the Occasional Club, because it was all women and we met occasionally, because we couldn't commit ourselves to meeting regularly 2 days a week like all the men clubs did. So we called it the Occasional Club. And we had a big debate around mothers and sons. And we have to take responsibility, all us mums and grandmothers. I'm a step-grandmother now as well. We have to take responsibility for nurturing our boys, right? Better, perhaps. We have to nurture our boys to be good bosses and good team players. And we have to, the whole of my family are feminists. Unashamedly, they are progressive feminists. All right. They believe in gender equality. And we have 3 boys, and I have a daughter, a stepdaughter, and a daughter-in-law. And they are very driven women. Both of them are key earners, and they have chosen their partners because they believe that, you know, it is about working together. And if one person takes their foot off the career accelerator, it is not because they're going into a support role full time. It is because the blend is because for the family, that is the right thing to do at the time. But both of them will support each other when they're ready to go back into a full-time career. So I do think as females, as mothers, as aunties, as godmothers of boys, we have a responsibility to shape our boys to be better gender parity global citizens inside their organizations, because you can influence, you can influence a 3-year-old. I have a 3-year-old step granddaughter, and she is already formulating her own ideas about what she thinks about boys and what she thinks about girls and who her friends are going to be and what clothes she should wear, blah, 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 blah. And it's really important we influence our boys to be better employers and to be better partners for us in the workplace, as well as in our home lives. So I think, yes, you're right. We don't see as many women go up the food chain into big roles, but I do think it's because I think, in my experience, if I sit down with a 30-year-old man and a 30-year-old woman that have the same qualifications, they have the same career to date, and I say to the man, tell me what your life looks like by the time you're 40. Nice big open question. Tell me what your life looks like by the time you're 40. They will say to me, I will be a director of a business. I will have 2 children. I will have a wife or a partner. I will live in this type of house. I will have these type of holidays. I will be on the board of a charity. I will do good work. I'll probably run my son's football team. And then I'll say, are you in a relationship? And they'll go, oh no. I'm like, oh, right. So you just think you're going to go out and collect all this stuff, do you? And I asked the same set of questions to a woman in 2020. Okay. And I haven't had that many different answers. Everybody says that women have changed over the last 25 years and blah. If I ask a woman of 30, what I will normally get back is, well, I'd like to be a director of a business. If I work hard and I'm recognized, I'd like to be a director of a business. What else would you like? Well, I'm in a relationship at the moment, so I guess we might have children at some point, but we might not. And we get all this kind of fluffy stuff. And actually, and this is why I'm afraid men have done better in the workplace, because they're much better at bullshitting than us. Okay. And we don't
that's true.
That we're entitled to have all those things. It's so, I mean, look, a 22-year-old woman will give me what a 22-year-old bloke will give me. But what happens to them in that age is they get bloody crushed. They get crushed by society, by the messaging that's coming through from their parents. Why aren't you in a relationship yet? You should be married. I was married by the time I was your age. I had 2 kids and a 3rd on the way. You can't balance a job and a career and a children at the same time. We get crushed, and we mustn't allow that to happen, because at 22 we have dreams. and we have ambitions, and we don't see any difference between women and men. And I've tried this out. I have a son of 25 and I have a son of 22, and I've been doing a bit of kind of case study work with them and their female friends. And when I spoke to their female friends when they were like third year university, so about to graduate, I would ask them those questions, and I got exactly the same answers, whether it was a man, a boy, or a girl. Something happens in those first 8 years that we start to crush our women and their ambition and their drive. And if they're seen to be ambitious and driven, you've seen the way I speak, I've had to tone that down so much over the years with men. I've had to play the game, you know, and I've had to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. Yeah. And we've had to play a game in order to get on, to be accepted in a male patriarchal corporate environment. But, you know, this is why the 2020 year of no turning back is why it's so important, not just from a BAME perspective, but from a female perspective too. And I'm not trying to reignite feminism here. I'm just saying that we need to work together with, you know, to create a fairer society inside our organizations. I don't actually believe I've ever met a white CEO that has on purpose stood in the way of a woman getting on. I just think we actually have to do some of our own reflection as well. It is not men's fault that we haven't got on, but it's very difficult for us to get on in a male career, in a male dominated, or the structure for careers was created by men. Second World War, you look at all the work that women did in the Second World War because the men had gone off to fight, and then as soon as they came back, we all got pushed back into the kitchen again. So right. You know, the work environment was created for male careers. And if you think about how women have developed their careers, we were nurses, we were secretaries, we'd be, you know, teachers, we were in domestic work, we worked in retail, and, you know, female careers, once we started to get into the professions, and I put PR as one of those professions, law, banking, once we started to go to university and get qualifications, and we knew we were just as good as men at entry level, and just as clever, nothing to do with our, you know, academic, you know, ability. But what we've had to do is we've had to make a male corporate environment work for the female career, and that's bloody difficult. So what's happened now with the pandemic is that male, that sort of that hierarchy, because we're all now working from home, and because that whole thing has been shattered, because the office will not be the office that we're all used to. The office will become a hub that perhaps we go to 2 or 3 times a week in order to have meetings and brainstorming sessions. You know, social distancing is going to be here for a while until they get a vaccine. So it's a real opportunity now for us to change the way our offices look, the way that they're, the way we work in the what's an office for, what do we come to work, you know, what do we come into our place of work to do, and then what work can be done at home. And then you've also got the female, you know, okay, so I don't know whether a study's been done on how many female directors in PR or female MDs by 1990 didn't have children. But I reckon in 1990, most of the CEOs of PR agencies or comms directors probably didn't have kids. If they got all the way through, they didn't have kids, because trying to navigate that when the attitudes were so bad about maternity leave, and obviously maternity pay has changed. Well, in the UK, maternity leave has changed a lot in the last 10 years. But we have to manage gaps in our CV, and the corporate world doesn't really like gaps on CVs. So so we've had to, so again, you know, the corporate world isn't kind to women, to the female career, and it uses us taking breaks to have kids or for caring reasons as an excuse to not let us get on.
And I think that's a big thing in North America, because I think one of the reasons why I came back home from living in the US back to Kenya was maternity being considered as a short-term disability. I mean, how do you look at maternity as short-term disability? Like what? And I wanted to have a family and still have a career. So I have 3 boys and have a career and I'm back home. But I mean, I think those are the things. And when you talk about the progress in the UK, I think the US is a little further behind. And I know there are people on this call and in our forum that, you know, live and work in the US, and those are real challenges. So let's talk a little bit. There's some questions that have come through, you know, talking about just giving you feedback and saying very, very interesting webinar, and appreciating your insights, Amanda, but requesting for you to please speak to the skills and qualifications that are required to thrive in a global PR or comms market. How do you effectively brand yourself for that market? And how do you transition from, you know, like a journalism role into some of this global PR and comms market?
Okay, so I think if you're a journalist, you need to think about your media relations skills, number one, because if you've worked for a national TV station or radio station or a local or a national newspaper, whether that's online or print, the bit that a company will want you for is your media relations expertise, is how to sell a story and what journalists look for to actually print a story, or you have a very good understanding of what the media look for in a story, what makes a good story, how do you influence to keep a story out, you know, because there's stories in, but also keeping stories out. And the role that you will go for is probably either media relations inside an organization would be your entry point. And then you have to learn the corporate comms skills or the consumer comms skills, because you won't have worked in an agency or in-house before. So what companies buy from journalists is the understanding of how the media works, and they will want to use your skills to help their organization have a better presence within the media. That's what they will buy your skills for. And you've got to be, you know, you're not going to get hired into a corporate affairs role immediately. You'll have to transition into that maybe after a year. So I think journalists often think they can just walk straight into a corporate affairs role, and you can't. You're going to be hard. You've got to think about what the employer is actually going to hire you, what skill set they're actually going to hire you for. In an agency, again, journalists are hired to go in to do media training. I know a lot of journalists don't want to do media training long term, but it is an entry point, because you are able to coach people on how to do really good media interviews. You can also do crisis management training, and again, you can be hired to do the media training for the team of the PR consultancy, and then you can be the go-to media relations person in the organization. That's really the entry point. So I'll give you an example. Now, my computer has just blinked at me saying I need to plug it into the mains. So if you lose me, I have not gone. Okay, I'll be back. So journalists, so yeah, I was going to give you an example, wasn't I? So I had a BBC journalist that I helped move into work for a charity called Help for Heroes, and he was hired as the media relations manager, and within a year he was doing all of the communications for the charity, as well as doing their sponsorship and their community engagement. So his entry point was, and I can remember him saying to me, I do not just want to go in as the media relations and crisis person, but I said, look, there's a longer term opportunity for you here, but your entry point has to be here, because that's what the organization, that's the job, and that's what they're going to hire you to do. So that's specifically for journalists. Are there any other types of backgrounds that are looking for how they package themselves? Because I want to try and answer the question, but
yes,
just for media. Okay, go on.
Sorry, go ahead, Patience.
I just said just for media and PR, specifically those are the group that is represented by these women attending the webinar.
No, I know that, but it's just I'm trying to understand when they say how do you package yourself up to move. I can answer the question about how a journalist can move from working a broadcast journalist into a PR consultancy, or a journalist moving into an in-house role. But if I've got people that are wanting to, for example, move from government relations into, you know, corporate PR, I kind of need to understand a bit more about, because I can give individual advice, but it's quite difficult for me to give it sort of collectively.
Yes,
I think the way that question was asked, sorry,
go ahead, Esther.
I think the way that question was asked, specifically the person who asked seemed to be speaking as a journalist. That's how I got it. But yes. I do know there are people on this call who probably work, not probably, I do know there are people in this call who work for government, for instance. So if you want to transition, for instance, from a government organization into, you know, international, how do you do that? Is this the point where she says she'll drop off?
Yeah, and then she said she will be back.
She said, don't be worried, she'll be back.
Yeah, she'll be back.
Okay.
Yes, there was that, Esther, in terms of transitioning. But
yes.
you know, the bulk of the guys here have moved from, you know, media into comms. But then there's a few like me who have come from non-media and, you know, also gotten into comms.
Yeah.
So I think there's, but the majority is media into comms.
Yeah.
Like
so maybe we might agree so that we have one that she addresses. So maybe it's easier for her to address the one for moving from journalism to global communication, or rather journalism to just, you know, communication role.
Yeah, because I think that's the majority of the guys here.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yes, sure.
And then I think the other question, just so that then we make sure that we pick them all when she comes back, was around attaching oneself to an international recruitment company as opposed to applying for these international roles.
Or like, you know, like the way sometimes you see these UN roles, let's say, for instance, you've seen a UN role that has been advertised, you want to get into it. Of course, there's that portal that, you know, they say you should apply through. But I think, you know, somebody would wonder, is it easier to go through a recruiter, you know, to sort of for that role? And maybe LinkedIn
there are also international jobs that you're not even aware of, but if you had an international recruiter support, then you might be more aware of such jobs, because not all of them come to your attention, really.
Yes, for sure. Okay,
sorry,
Amanda is back.
Oh, hi, Amanda.
Sorry.
So yes, no worries. So then the request is therefore for you to focus on those who are transitioning from media and journalism into a global communications role, because that will form the majority of the members in this particular network.
Okay, so I mean, a really good example is a journalist that I worked with a few years ago, and and this is where you need a good recruiter. And I don't know what your local recruitment consultancies are like, but she was a lady that had been a journalist for about 10 years, and she came to me and said, I really want to move into a corporate role, and I want to be corporate affairs director of a big company in 10 years' time. So what I did was, I said, right, what you need to do is, now this was quite Machiavellian when I did it. I said, could you take 2 weeks? I'm not sure whether you're allowed to do it anymore, but I said, why don't you take 2 weeks of your leave, and I can get you, I'll get you a placement at a communications consultancy, or if you've finished your job, find a communications consultancy within this network and get them to take you on for 2 weeks on a, you know, minimum wage, or, I mean, I don't know, we're not allowed to take people on no pay in the UK anymore. So minimum working, or shadowing, for a couple of weeks to work out whether you want to work in an agency, because actually understanding how an agency works is really important. And if you go into an in-house role, often you'll be using agencies. So actually understanding how agencies work is quite important. Also with agencies, you're working on a lot of different clients. So you get the variety of working for clients in different sectors, and you'll be using, different sectors, and you'll also learn very quickly the difference between corporate affairs, public affairs, digital, social, and consumer and media relations and media training. So I got her 2 lots of placements for 2 weeks with 2 leading PR consultancies in London. And then she decided that actually she didn't want to work in a PR agency. She wanted to go in-house. Then a role came up at Tesco, which is a leading supermarket retailer, and she applied for a job in their media relations team. And I remember there were 2 jobs. One was a corporate affairs manager and one was media relations manager. And I said, I know the job you want, but this is the job you'll get. So go for the job you'll get, and then you can go for the job you want. So she applied for the media relations one and she got it. And one of the reasons she got it was of her journalism skills. They knew she understood how to manage the media. But the other reason they took her on was because they had 2 or 3 PR agencies working with them that also did the media relations for them. They really needed someone that understood how to manage a PR agency. So she took the media relations role, and now 8 years later, she's had 2 years at Unilever in a group comms role, and she's now one of the top comms people at Tesco. And her background was journalism, but that was the route that she took to, and I think that's quite a good example of how somebody moved from being a news journalist. She wasn't even a business journalist. She was just general news. If you're a political journalist, the route in is obviously to go into public affairs and policy. That's quite an easy, I'd say, an obvious move to work in the policy and public policy, or what we call special situations team. So if I look at all the big agencies, for example, the Edelmans, the Webbers, the Blue Rubicon, Teneos, all the big global agencies, they will all have ex-special advisors from Whitehall. And a lot of those, not a lot, but some of those special advisors have come from a media background, have come from journalism background. So they go into Whitehall to be special advisors to ministers on the media side of things. And then they move into consultancies to be advisors, and they can get really well paid. I spoke to a chap yesterday, and his training was actually a researcher at Whitehall. He then went to work for a trade association as a media relations person. He then went to work as special advisor for the education secretary, and then he ends up with the prime minister. He was only earning about 70,000 in that job. He's now being paid 150,000 to be an advisor at one of the leading public affairs consultancies. That public affairs consultancy does media training for people that have to sit in front of House of Commons select committees, where you are completely grilled. And he does the training for that. He's paid 150,000 a year, so
Amanda, that's 150,000 pounds.
Yeah.
Just for clarity, so that we don't think it's 150,000 shillings.
No, 150,000 pounds. Yeah. And that journalist I was talking to you about, there was another journalist, the one I talked about joining the charity first. He was on, I think, £65,000 at the BBC. I moved him to work, and this is a charity. He got this job as the head of media relations on 90,000. He's now working for part of the police force as their head of communications for one of our big counties in the UK. And he's earning, he's very driven by purpose. So he was never that keen to go up the corporate ladder, the commercial corporate ladder. So he works in the public sector, and he's earning at least 150,000 now. and when he left the BBC, he was on 60. So the people in the UK that work for the BBC, work for our national newspapers, whether it's online, people that work for big media companies, they're not paid. They're paid. They're paid between 50 and 60, 70,000 a year, unless they're a presenter. And obviously, the presenters, if they're the top presenters, get paid a lot more. But the average length of service, I normally help people with when they're about 10 years into their journalism career, when they want to flip across. So there's another example of a lad. I'm trying to think, make sure I give you female examples, actually. So someone that we helped move across from Newsnight, which is the BBC programme, we put into Freud's. You've probably heard of Matthew Freud. Freud's a big consumer agency in London, but they're a global organisation. And he went in to actually set up an in-house production arm for Freud's. And he now runs that as a sort of mini business inside Freud's. He'd never run a profit and loss before. He'd had a budget, but he'd never actually run a P&L. And he nearly left after the first year because he was finding it very difficult to work out how much business he needed to bring in to make a profit. So he had to learn how to run a mini business inside a business. And he also struggled with having to get the consultants to sell his production services to their clients. So he had to build relationships internally with the consultants of Freud's because he was offering the clients an add-on. But he's still there for 4 years later and doing really well. I think salary-wise, it's probably on about, he left the BBC on about 50, and I think he's on about 110,000 now. So, journalists in the UK can move on and move out quite quickly, and they can move up the food chain quite quickly. I think in-house, the entry point is definitely running the press office or going in as media relations. That's the entry point. And then if you go to a big company, the press office will normally be 4 or 5 people, and then you become head of press, and then you move on to become head of corporate affairs. That will be the next move. And then you move on to become communications director. Now, the other career piece that I always advise people in the UK is if you're looking to go into in-house, your first job will probably be UK. So it might be that you are the local. So it might be Kenya. Then it might be the whole of Africa. Then you want an EMEA role. And then you want global. And that's the way it normally goes. Local to EMEA to global. And if you want to keep progressing your career, and some people get stuck only working on their local market, and your salary will go up if you include the EMEA piece and then the and then the global piece. But I think the other thing to point out is to make sure that if you're in a job already with a corporate, that your appraisals, you're making it very clear that you are ambitious and that you want your career to go beyond the local market. You want it to go, and are people asking for transfers? Because most global organizations will move people internationally, and one should always be asking if one can be moved internationally, because it's much easier to move to so if I'm talking to somebody in London and they want to go and work in Switzerland, or they want to go and work in Dubai or Mumbai or Singapore, I will always advise them to try and move with their current employer if they possibly can, even if they leave that current employer within the first year, because they can manage the work permits, they can manage, you might even get a budget for actually moving. Whereas if you're going to a new company and a new country at the same time, it tends to be, it's more it's easier to move in a local market if you're already there. So we get requests the whole time for people to come to London, and they say, well, can you find me a job to start in? And I say, if you haven't worked in London before, you're not ever going to get a job in London. You're just not going to get a job in London unless you've got London experience. We're really picky. I think London is probably one of the most difficult markets to get into in the world, because the PR sector is very segmented. So you have to have corporate, you know, you have to have very specific experience. Clients are, agencies are very, very fussy, and they shouldn't be, but they are. So
Amanda, then do you recommend, if you're looking for, say, an international organization, then would it be best to go with a recruiter? And there's also is it a perception or is it real that sometimes there are international jobs that might not be readily advertised, or the organizations prefer to go through a recruiter, so you never really hear about the jobs anyway? What's your take on that?
Yeah, look, I mean, only 30% of jobs go to recruiters, but 30% do go to recruiters. And that hasn't really changed in 30 years. And the higher up the food chain you go, the more likely they are to go to a search consultancy where the job is never advertised. So, you know, headhunters. So senior people, you need to be on the headhunters' radar. And it's a myth that, look, headhunters tell their clients that they start every search from scratch. That is not true. That is simply not true. If you are a PR headhunter, it is your job to know who is good in the market. They tell their clients they're starting from scratch because they have researchers that need their salaries paid. So they charge the client a third up front. So what's the client getting for a third of the fee up front? So you say you're doing a market map of everybody that could do this job. Now, okay, I'm being flippant slightly, but they're not starting from scratch. So you do need to get on the headhunter's radar. And it is a myth that they only interview people when they have the job, and that they, you know, don't call me, I'll call you. Well, how on earth do you ever get on anyone's radar if you are waiting for the call? You're not going to get the call unless they know who you are you? So now recruiters will see people all the time because they are always trying to replenish their portfolio of candidates. Headhunters do see people they will interview people for roles that have not yet come on. And then once you're on their radar, then you are more likely to get the call about the role when it does come on. Yeah. So all the big international headhunters, so the Russell Reynolds, the Spencer Stewarts, the Odgers, the Korn Ferries, I mean, the list goes on, and you'll have local headhunters as well. They may have a cutoff, but they might not see people below a certain salary level. But certainly, if someone's got 20 years experience, then one needs to be quite pushy, I think, and pick up the phone to them and ask them for some time. And you can frame it how you want. Okay. You know, but you need to get in front of the headhunters. They need to know who you are. Advertising. The other thing when jobs are advertised, which people don't do enough of, is I find people are very compliant nowadays, and they follow the advertise. If a job's advertised on a website, a company website, or on a job site, there'll be instructions of how you apply for it. So you need to be a bit tenacious here. Go and do your research, find out who the comms director is of the company you're applying to, find out the name of the CEO. There's no reason why you shouldn't link in with them. There's no reason why you shouldn't go onto the website, start to look at the company values. You can apply for the job officially, but there's nothing stopping you sending an email. We can all work out companies' email configurations, and sending another note along saying, I've just applied for this role. I'd love the opportunity to have a chat with you about it before the official interview process starts. This is the reason I'm interested. Keep it short, keep it snappy, put it in bullet points. But if you do that, most people do not do that. And the reason they don't do it is because they think that they have gone against the application process, and therefore it will not be in their favor, and it will get, you know, a mark against them because they've been, you know, naughty and not compliant. Whereas in my experience, when somebody has done that, actually it can show initiative as well.
All right. So there's another question here. Why are, journalists leaving the newsroom and going into comms? Is it
better paid?
Better paid?
And it's a lifestyle thing as well. A lot of journalists are working ridiculous hours. So when you actually work out how many hours they're working and how much they're being paid, and you do it on an hourly rate, whereas if you go into, I'm not saying agency and in-house work is, but you do get slightly more regular hours. You have a bit more control over the hours that you work, and I think it's definitely better paid. Once you get to a certain level, I think at entry level and the first 3 or 4 years, it's probably much of a muchness. But I think certainly in the UK, I mean, I've interviewed journalists that are on £55,000, £60,000, and they're in their late 30s, 40s, and they're working, maybe something like 8 days on, 5 days off, and they start to have a family, and they never get any time with their family and friends, and they just get. I think when you're in your 20s, it doesn't matter so much, but once you start to settle down a bit, it's just not. It's not a very family friendly career, is it? Journalism. It can be very, very challenging from a time point of view, time invested, and I think, it's better paid once you get a little bit further up the food chain. It's better paid.
All right. So thank you, Amanda. I think all the questions that came through the chat have been answered. I would like to hand this back over to Patience. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, Wabi, for doing this fantastic job. And thank you so much for Amanda for answering all your questions. It's been, I think, more than the hour that we had negotiated for. Thank you so much for your time. But I wonder, this is very personal for me. When I have done an international course, for example, the course that I pursued at Cardiff University, International Public Relations and Global Communication Management, will you advise that, when you pursue such a course, then is it easy for one to start immediately into an international organization or have international experience at the beginning? Because most likely, I may love to work for my government. I really enjoy working in government. And most likely, I would really love to get a government job. But then I imagine for the experience that I've had in classes or maybe in class, I would love to put it in practical use at an international organization. What will your advice be?
Well, it's the question, should you get into an international organization as soon as you've done your, yes, definitely. I mean, you haven't come all the way over to Cardiff, have you, to get an international qualification? So I think my advice to you would be is if you have to take a local one, do, but you need to keep applying at the same time for international ones. And, look, I haven't got where I've got to without being, use a bit of charm. People always say to me, you use your white middle class charm, and I rock it every single time. If I can use it, I will bloody use it, I'm afraid. I will use it. Why not? And I think, one of the things that I did early on in my career is I reverse mentored. And I meant to say this to your some of the youngsters listening. Reverse mentor on the back of the fact that you are Black. Ask to reverse mentor, okay? Reverse mentor a white person. They will absolutely love it. Ideally, ask to reverse mentor a white person that works for a company that you want to work for.
Okay, I hear you.
They will not turn you down. They will not turn you down. And the other thing, now listen, I played a game with my returners 2 years ago, okay? Because I have 40 of them, and they were all being really wimpy about applying for jobs because they were all applying for permanent roles, but they all wanted to work 3 days a week. And these are really good women. They were 15 years into their career. They had been marketing directors and comms directors. They'd been ex-journalists of national newspapers, and they were all really competent women. And something had been squashed in them over the time they'd been out of work. So I said, right, in the email header, when you apply for this job, the proper route, but when you send your other nice email through saying, I've just applied for this role, I want you to put in the email header, I am a female returner. Because in the UK, there's been loads of conversations about returners. And I said, I can bet you now, 100% you will get an email back. Because no one is going to be seen to be discriminating against a female returner. So one of the Black candidates I'm working with, look, and I'm not advocating that you will go out and do this. I'm just saying that you have, you know, you have to be brave. And in the current market, it will reward people that are brave. So I've got a youngster at the, well, she's not that young actually, she's about 32, 33, and she's in sports marketing, sports PR, and she's Black. And she said, I said, right, if you want to get an interview, this is what you need to do. You apply for the job and then you send an email through and go, I am Black and female and I'm forging a career in sports marketing in the subject heading. She has had every single one of her emails replied to.
I see.
You are Black and you are female. It is your time. Okay, you have to take this moment because you will, you know, and so what if they don't come back to you? They probably weren't going to come back to you anyway. You know, it's a bit like the dating game. You know, you have to have a lot of plates spinning, but get the plates properly spinning, not just going round slowly. They've got to spin, you know. So, and it is about, one has to look, you're PR professionals as well. You're all resourceful, you're all tenacious, you all know what makes a good story. You know, you've also got to think about, one of the questions was, how do I package myself up? Yes, you can spend hours putting your CV together. You can spend hours thinking about how you're going to frame your skills, but actually you've got to be quite sassy and canny and resourceful and tenacious as well with how you make your application. So those two little hints about reverse mentoring, that one, and also, you know, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? And I know that you're living in a much, you know, bigger Black community than we are in London, and that tactic might not work in Kenya. But in London, that tactic I've just given you, it would definitely get someone an interview, because no business in London at the moment will turn down an email from a really competent professional in PR where the subject header says, I'm a Black woman looking to forging my career in PR in London. You are definitely going to get a reply and probably going to get an interview. Now that might not work in Kenya, all right, but yeah. I'm just trying to give you an example of the tenaciousness that you need to have in the current job market, and I think that's probably globally as well.
Thank you so much. So I'm officially Black and female, and I'll be heading back to London in a short, I think in a few months. So maybe in a few weeks, so that I can try and get some plasma there or some experience there, and then I see what the world opens for me. So thank you so much, Amanda. This has really been very insightful. I would like to hand over this to Stella Kiguta, who will do the closing remarks.
Thank you, Patience. I'd just like to start by thanking Amanda. Amanda, on behalf of Wakanda and all the people of color, it seems this is our season. Thank you so much. I think what I hear from your story is that you have taken a power that you have, which is what you call the white privilege, but then used it to be a door opener for others. And that's incredible. And we salute you. We thank you on behalf of the people everywhere who you have supported, those past, present, and those future who are yet to come, including ourselves. So thank you very much for that. I would also like to thank all the ladies who have joined the session today. I think it would be great if we had a wonderful speaker like Amanda and then nobody showed up. So thank you all for taking time to show up and to be here with us today to have this very important discussion about how we can position ourselves in the global space. I also want to thank the leadership team of our network and all the ladies who have been working tirelessly behind the scenes to make sure that this was put together as excellently as it was. Thank you very much. Your work is not what you do is not taken for granted. So thank you, because it's all volunteered and all from the heart. We appreciate it. I think the fourth thing I want to say is the three things that I took out from this session today. And the first, as Amanda has concluded, is that it is our time. A lot of groundwork has been done by people like herself and others, women who have gone before us, even in our space here, people like Martha Karua, who was not taught, and such others. And they have really set the stage for us to shine. And so as women, as people of color, as African women who are proudly Black, it is time for us to get onto the stage. And it is also time for companies to demonstrate their commitment to diversity and all these things that, they put up on the walls. It's time to bring them to life. Now, it's pointless for the stage to be set and for us not to show up. So the second thing is you need to show up. You need to show up for the job that is available as you prepare for the one that is to come. Okay, you will not always, just hit a straight jackpot. So take the path. I think Amanda has painted clearly some of the paths that have come through, for people that she has worked with. And so this is our time to really show up and to show off what we are made of. I think even in the session last week where I presented, I did say that this is the time for communications, people. It is time. Companies want to show and to demonstrate that they are taking diversity to the next level, and we are the people to give them that voice. And speaking of voices, I think we can all do what Amanda has done for us, which is to pay it forward. So each of us in our corner of the world, there is somebody who we need to be a voice for, like she has been a voice for us. So how can you be the person who speaks for others, for somebody who cannot speak for themselves? And how can you be a door opener for other people? So Amanda, again, thank you very much for challenging, for inspiring, for contributing, and for growing the network of people of color and Black people within the field of communications. We appreciate you. Thank you very much. And thank you, ladies. And over back to you, Patience.
Fantastic. I wouldn't have said it any better than you have, Stella. Thank you so much. Amanda, I know you are recruiting for ambassadors and you're recruiting for advisors. Please consider this network. There are many people here with very great experience and are ready to take the mantle, as they said. It's our time. We are Black, we are female, and we would love to do this with you. So should you want to consider expanding your network, remember to consider this network. You'll have all the brains and all the female energy that you need in this from Kenya. Thank you so much. Over to you, Esther Karago.
Okay, we'll just do a photo session before we end this. So if we could all put on our videos, Sheila is on the other end. She'll take a photo of all of us together before we call it a day. Sheila, please let us know when you're ready. So nice to see all these faces.
Yeah, right. Amanda, now you get to see everyone else who was listening to you.
Yeah.
I know.
Sheila? Okay, let us know when to smile.
We have so many people without videos on.
Ladies, we want to see you. We only get to see you now once in 2 weeks, so please.
Having some challenges with my video.
Okay.
So can we all smile for the camera?
Okay.
1, 2, 3. Say ngwashe. Amanda saying ngwashe.
Guache.
Guache.
Amanda, are you able to pronounce that?
Guache.
Yay! Very well done.
Well
Amanda,
done.
Guache is a sweet potato.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've already taken the photo. Though we have so many ladies without their videos on, but I've taken it like that. So thank you, everyone.
Oh,
okay.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, as well. And good luck with everything. And yeah, go out and shape the future.
We will.
Yes, we will.
Thank you.
One more thing. Beatrice will just say the closing prayer, and then those who want to hang out for a few minutes can, before we say goodbye to each other. So Beatrice, please go ahead.
But before that, Esther, maybe should